Welcome to the City of Bakersfield Planning Commission meeting. This television broadcast is made available through cooperation with the local cable companies, the County of Kern, and the City of Bakersfield. The Planning Commission meets on the first and third Thursdays of each month. You can watch the rebroadcast of this meeting Saturday at 7 p.m. and Sunday at 10 a.m. The planning meeting agenda is posted on the city's website at www.bakersfieldcity.us. Presiding over today's meeting, Chair Larry Coman.
I have to let the music fade. That's a nice touch. It is my pleasure to call to order the June 18th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Coman.
Here.
Commissioner Rudnick.
Here.
Commissioner Bell.
Here.
Commissioner Bowers. Commissioner Cater.
Here.
Commissioner Lomas.
Here.
And Commissioner Wade.
Thank you. On March 4th, Governor Newsom declared a state of emergency in California due to the threat of COVID-19. The governor also passed several executive orders related to social distancing, shelter-at-home practices, and more. These orders are also include the suspension of some components of the Brown Act related to public meetings like this one. As such, Commissioner Bowers was supposed to participate by phone this afternoon, but he called in with a conflict, so he will not be available by phone. But all voting tonight will be conducted by roll call vote. In addition, I have to bring to attention a executive order by Governor Newsom this afternoon, which now requires people in California must wear face coverings when they are in the high-risk situations listed below. The first one is inside of or in line to enter any indoor public space. And for that reason, we're going to require face masks at this meeting. Obviously, some people maybe don't have it. If you have it, please put it on. And try to remember to bring them in the future to any public event. So I'm going to put my mask on. People don't usually have trouble hearing me, so I'm sure that you'll be able to understand what I'm saying. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready to pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for attending tonight's Planning Commission meeting. This commission provides an opportunity for public participation in the development process throughout the city of Bakersfield. The Planning Commission considers a wide variety of projects, including subdivision maps, zone changes, general plan amendments, and more. When applications are received, the City Planning Division analyzes the request. Planning staff will present the facts about the project along with their recommendation to the Planning Commission, who will approve the item or make a recommendation as appropriate. Our goal is to carefully consider each project and make a decision that will balance individual rights with public welfare and the general well-being of the community. Anybody having trouble understanding me with the mask on? Okay, good, thank you. We will now receive public statements. This time is reserved for anyone wishing to address the commission on any matter not on the public hearings portion of the agenda. If you are here on items 5A through 5D, this is not the time to speak. Does anyone in the audience wish to address the commission? If so, please come forward and state your name. Okay, Seeing none, we'll now move on to the consent calendar non-public hearing items. Consent calendar non-public hearing items are typically involve housekeeping or administrative matters that do not require a public hearing. Does any commissioner wish to remove a consent calendar non-public hearing item for separate consideration? Okay. Then may I have a motion to adopt staff recommendation on the consent calendar non-public hearing items?
Not me, I wasn't here.
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Bell
I'll second.
and Commissioner Cater was second. Madam Clerk, please conduct a roll call vote.
Commissioner Coman,
Yes.
Commissioner Rudnick,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowers, Commissioner Cater,
Yes.
Commissioner Lomas,
Abstain.
and Commissioner Wade. Motion is approved with Commissioner Bowers and Wade absent and Commissioner Lomas abstaining.
Thank you. We will now move on to consent calendar public hearing items. This next section includes public hearing items that are considered routine or non-controversial. These items have been reviewed by staff and are conditioned in accordance with the requirements of the municipal code. The planning director will read the items on the consent calendar to ensure that the public has an understanding of the items to be considered. If you would like to speak on an item, please come forward after the items are read and ask that the item be removed for discussion. If the item is not removed by a member of the public or a commissioner, the commission will vote on all items in one motion without further comment. So, Director Johnson, would you like to read the agenda items, please?
Thank you, Chair Coleman. Good evening, Commissioners, members of the public. Thank you for attending tonight. There are 4 items on the consent agenda as displayed on the screen. The first item is vesting tentative track map 7334, located at the northeast corner of Panama Lane and South Allen Road. At the request of the applicant, staff is recommending consideration of this map be continued to your Commission's regularly scheduled meeting of July 16th, 2020. Item 5B is General Plan Amendment Zone Change Number 19-0292. This project is located at the northeast corner of Taft Highway and South 8th Street, consisting of an amendment of the land use element designation from general commercial to light industrial, and a change in zone classification from regional commercial to light manufacturing on 20.55 acres. The next item is in response to a City Council referral to amend the Bakersfield Municipal Code within Title 17, also known as the zoning ordinance, specifically to amend Section 17.61.020 related to approved landscape plan requirements. And the last item on the consent agenda is in response to a separate City Council referral to amend Title 17 by adding and amending sections related to a determination of uses not listed in the zoning ordinance. A memorandum was prepared and provided to your commission, so staff's recommendation is for this item to be approved, is to approve the ordinance amendment incorporating the memo dated June 18th, 2020, and recommend the same to City Council. This concludes staff's reading of the consent agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. At this time, I will open all of the consent calendar public hearing items. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on a consent calendar public hearing item? Again, this is not the time to take testimony, just to ask something to be pulled off the consent calendar.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chair Coleman, Aaron Oliver with Lane Engineers, the applicant for item 5B. We'd like to request that item 5B be pulled for a request to modify one of the conditions of approval and to allow us to answer or address any questions that the planning commissioners may have on the project.
Okay, thank you. Does any commissioner wish to, I'm sorry, does anybody else wish to pull an item on the consent calendar, public hearing items? Okay, seeing none. Does any commissioner wish to remove a consent calendar public hearing item? I see none. Okay, at this time, the public hearing on all of the consent calendar public hearing items not removed are now closed. May I get a motion to adopt staff's recommendation on the consent calendar public hearing items not removed,
I do.
incorporating all staff memorandum and revised staff recommendation?
I'll make that motion.
That's Commissioner Lomas
I'll second.
and Commissioner Rudnick. Madam Clerk, will you please conduct a roll call vote?
Commissioner Coman,
Yes.
Commissioner Rudnick,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowers, Commissioner Cater,
Yes.
Commissioner Lomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade. Motion is approved with Commissioner Bowers and Commissioner Wade absent.
Thank you. It is now time to hear any consent calendar public hearing items removed from that portion of the agenda and the public hearing items. Before we begin, I want to explain how the hearing will be conducted. Staff will first give a report, then those in favor of the project will be allowed to speak. Those in opposition to the project will be able to speak after all those in favor have spoken. Each side will be given 5 minutes to provide rebuttal comments. Individual speakers may ask questions during their statements, but the questions will not be answered until the public hearing on that item is closed. Written comments may be given to the clerk, who will provide copies to the commission. Please be respectful of others participating in the hearing by not repeating the remarks of a previous speaker and presenting any new comments or thoughts in a concise and clear way. Mr. Johnson, would you please provide us with your staff report regarding item 5B?
Thank you, Chair Coleman. Item 5B is a request for a general plan amendment and zone change to facilitate construction of a travel center. The project is located at the northeast corner of the Taft Highway and South H Street intersection and consists of 20.5 acres. The site, as with the property to the north and east, are undeveloped. Property to the south of Taft Highway is developed with mobile home parks, a mobile home sales lot, and an RV park. Property to the west of South H Street includes a smog check business and a nursery. The request includes an amendment of the land use element of the Metropolitan Bakersfield General Plan from GC, or General Commercial, to LI, Light Industrial. The request also includes a change in zone classification from C2, Regional Commercial, to M1, Light Manufacturing. In order to provide a perspective to the location of this project, the site is identified on the screen with a yellow star. The yellow dotted line a quarter mile to the south is representative of the southern border of the city limits. The yellow circle a third of a mile to the north along State Route 99 is the Welcome to Bakersfield sign. And the polygon 1 mile to the north is the Gateway project, where the Bass Pro Shop is proposed to be sited. As previously mentioned, the general plan amendment and zone change are intended to facilitate construction of a travel center, specifically a Love's Travel Stop and Country Store. The development is focused towards travelers, both passenger vehicles and semi-trucks stopping for fuel, rest, and/or food. The site would consist of multiple uses, including approximately 8 passenger fueling islands, 9 truck fueling islands, 3,600 square foot fast food restaurant, 11,000 square foot convenience store, 11,000 square foot truck maintenance building, 88 passenger vehicle parking spaces, and 111 truck parking spaces. The proposed travel center predominantly provides amenities typical of the current zoning of C2, with the exception of the trucking component. The on-site truck maintenance building will provide light maintenance service that includes repairing and replacing truck tires, air filters, wiper blades, oil, and other fluid changes. No major engine repairs or other major mechanical services will be performed on site. This type of maintenance is permitted in the proposed M1 zone. Regarding the truck parking, it should be noted that long-term trucking yards require a conditional use permit in the M1 zone. However, short-term parking of trucks associated with a travel center or truck stop is currently not a listed use in the zoning ordinance. As part of the City Council referral to amend Title 17 related to a determination of uses not listed in the zoning ordinance, a truck stop was identified as a compatible use with the M1 zone with conditions to protect uses of nearby land. Therefore, should your commission approve the general plan amendment and zone change, the applicant will be required to obtain approval of a conditional use permit, or CUP. The applicant has already initiated the CUP process by completing the site plan review portion, and draft conditions have been established. Those conditions are included as an attachment to your commission staff report. As part of the review, the applicant submitted a landscape plan showing the proposed trees, hedges, and ground cover for the site. Additional submittals included elevations of the maintenance building as seen on the left of your screen and the restaurant convenience store as seen on the right of your screen. It should be noted that business signs complying with the sign ordinance are approved ministerially, but commercial and industrial centers may request a comprehensive sign plan that allows deviations from the sign ordinance in order to create an effect both desired and unique that will enhance the overall environment of the development. The applicant has chosen to submit a comprehensive sign plan, which is currently under review by staff. These plans require your commission's approval, so the business signs shown on the elevations here are subject to approval. The comprehensive sign plan will be brought back for separate consideration. This next slide displays an overlay of the site plan onto the project site to provide an example of how it will be configured in relation to surrounding property. Staff has reviewed the proposal for compatibility with the goals and policies contained within the Metropolitan Bakersfield General Plan land use element and determined consistency as outlined on pages 6, 7, and 8 of your staff report. Staff also prepared a mitigated negative declaration in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act. That document and associated technical studies are also included as an attachment to your commission staff report. In compliance with Senate Bill 18, staff notified the American Indian tribes of the proposed project and location of the site. No tribal comments were received during the 90-day consultation period. Signs were also posted on site and public notification provided in compliance with state and local requirements. No written comments were received from the general public. However, comments were received from various agencies. Those comments are summarized on pages 9 through 11 of your staff report. Based on the foregoing, the project has been found to be compatible with existing development within the area, consistent with the land use goals and policies as contained in the general plan, and consistent with the zoning ordinance. For these reasons, staff is recommending approval of the general plan amendment zone change number 19-0292. Staff is available for questions, as is the applicant who is in the audience with their team members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. The public hearing on this item is now open. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the project? If so, please step to the microphone, identify yourself, and proceed.
Good evening again. Aaron Oliver, Lane Engineers, the applicant for the project. Our request was to pull from consent to entertain questions and also to request a modification to one of the conditions of approval. The condition of approval we're requesting a modification to is number 8 for the general plan amendment zone change. And specifically, we are requesting that the condition would be revised to read as follows. And in the context of understanding Planning Commission concerns about the underlying zoning being changed and the certainty of this project being constructed. So the following is what we wish to change it to. If the property is sold to a new landowner other than the end user or an affiliate of the end user named in the staff report, the new owner shall obtain approval of future site plans from the Planning Commission prior to receiving necessary permits to develop the site. And with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions, but otherwise I'd like to turn it over to Kim Van Dyke with Loves to talk about the project.
Please step forward and state your name and have at it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kim, K-Y-M Van Dyke, and I reside in Midway, Utah. And first off, I'd like to thank Commissioner Coleman, commissioners, city staff for your time tonight to listen to me talk about our project. I know there's 5 minutes. What I'd also like to request before I give a quick summary is if I can reserve the right to come back up if there's questions specifically that you need answered.
Let me be more clear. There's really no time limit on your presentation. There is a time limit on rebuttals. So.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So with that said, I'd start saying that it would probably take me 5 hours to be able to scratch the surface of the company that I work for. So to make it short, I've been in this industry for almost 30 years, 5 with our competitor, and almost 25 with Loves. So I started out with a competitor, and in 1997 was recruited to come to Loves, and I've worked in just about every part of Loves in that 23 years, with the last 14 being in real estate development in the western half of the United States. We've brought some displays that we put out here for you to look at. And while I'm talking, if you want, we also brought just some photos. And the photos say a little bit more about what we are all about as I talk about it. So if you would like, I could bring them up and you could kind of just start passing around while you listen to me jabber away.
You can hand them to the clerk and she'll distribute them.
Okay. So in part of the little packets that we put together, I apologize, they're not up to date. I think the main packet that tells you a little bit about Loves is 2 years behind, so it only shows about 400 travel centers, and now today we just opened up our 522nd travel stop. Nationwide in 41 different states. We serve 4-wheel traffic with a typical looking C-store. If you haven't been to a Love's, the photos and the displays don't do justice. Without a doubt, we have the finest product in the industry in what we do. We give the best customer service. Our buildings are the nicest. Restrooms are the cleanest. Customer service is the best, bar none. So I say that with conviction because I love working for the company that I work for, or I wouldn't have changed from who I did work for. They're unbelievable people to work for. It's still a family-owned business, probably still the top 10 Fortune 500 privately held company in the nation. And we cover 9, 10, 11 in California with like 5 or 6 near completion or in the works. And then the rest spread out through the other 41 states. And we have truck services. As you notice in the back of our site plans, we separate the cars and the trucks for a reason. But if you've never been to a Lowe's, I wish you would visit some of the one. The newest one is Madera, which is a what we call a Tier 1, and now we have Tier Zeros, which we will have here, which is even newer and nicer. But if you could get up to Madera, I think you'll see a good idea of kind of the newer look of a Love's, much more so than Tulare or Tehachapi. Those would be the closest ones. So with that said, the company Love's is more than just a travel stop for all of you, I would hope, at some time needs gas or sodas or something to eat while you're traveling. But the other big pluses is that Lowe's is concerned about being here. We want to be here. We picked this site for a reason. And we also want to make sure that we're part of your community. So on day one, whenever, and hopefully with approvals to move forward with our project, and I hope you do, we donate $2,000 to any place that you pick, or commission picks, or the city staff picks. From there, we also do fundraising. We're the largest fundraiser in the nation for Children's Miracle Network. I think we're over 24 million in the last 13 years. It's in that brochure. All the money that's raised stays with your local hospital. So it doesn't go back to Oklahoma, so it stays here. Love's has also been known throughout all the years when there's natural disasters, the Love's family has stepped up on their own personal accord with millions of dollars that they have put into different areas for Hurricane or Katrina, and I could go on and on and on. They're great people to work for, or I wouldn't have been here this long with them. So the other pluses that we feel that we have to offer to your community is jobs with the travel stop and the Arby's and the tire care. We're going to be probably 40 to 58 employees, mix of mainly full-time, part-time also, 3 different shifts, open 24 hours. A lot of sales tax revenue coming through because of the fueling that we do. We're one of the nation's largest, if not the largest, fueling company in the nation. And we also are going to have the amenities that people look for when they're traveling out there on the road that are the best. So I hope that you consider us strongly to be in your community. We won't let you down. We're excited to be here in our growth that we've done, even with what's gone on in our country. Here as of late, we've been one of those necessary businesses that has been vitally important throughout the country, and we hope that we could provide that same service here in your community. Answer questions if you've got some now, or reserve the right to do them later.
We'll come back to questions at a later time. Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak in favor of the project? Seeing none, is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the project? If so, please step to the microphone, identify yourself, and proceed. Seeing none, does any commissioner have any questions for the public on this item? Remember, this is not the time to express any opinions on the matter. It is only time to ask questions. Oh, technology is wonderful. I guess Commissioner Rudnick was first, and so we'll go with him. Commissioner Rudnick.
Good evening. I just have a couple of questions for the developer. You had mentioned employees hire. How many full part-time folks or do you think in the center will have?
Of the totals that I mentioned, I would say, I've been out of operations for a little while, but I would say it's still closer to 60-40 in favor of full-time.
So in other words, are you going to have 60 people there working full-time and 20 part? I'm trying to get a parameter.
We break them up in different shifts. So you will not ever have 60 there at one time. So kind of give you an example of, kind of depends on how busy these different shifts are, and all locations are a little bit different, but you may have on the first morning shift, you may have 20, 25, and then the second one maybe 20, and the night shift maybe 15 at a time. So I would say probably 40 full-time total and probably 20, 28 part-time.
So 65 people, new jobs created.
I would say so, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you talked about sales tax revenue from fuel sales.
Uh-huh.
What do you estimate that will be for our city? I know we get a piece of that. I don't know the percentage, but.
Well, there's a lot of them that are getting that sales tax revenue today in California. Like I said, 11 different ones. From what we have seen, and I would caveat all that by saying right now is not a good example time of what's going on. So there's no difference of being probably gas volume nationwide is down about 50%, but our diesel volume is not. So it's about even today. So based on all that, I think in a typical normal year, you're going to be seeing with sales tax revenue and property tax probably upwards of $600,000 to $900,000 a year.
Combined property tax and
Yeah, property
sales
tax probably, I don't know, property tax 150. The rest is going to be, majority is going to be the fuel tax in California is the big kicker. It's going to be, I'm thinking, for this location, you're going to be in the 6 to 7, and then add your property tax to that.
Are there any other economic benefits the center will bring us that you haven't mentioned for us to know?
We don't solicit anything other than the product that we give, but there's many, many examples that around the country when a Love's travel stop goes in, I think that our name and our business and what we deliver is enough that you see a lot more restaurants and a lot others that want to be in the neighborhood. We do have, and the reason I say that again too is that we have almost all the major fast serve restaurants that look forward to being in a Love's. They know what we do, they know the volume that we bring, and they like to be around the Love's. And so that causes that synergy to grow areas, and we've seen it in many, many locations, more of the new ones than the old ones today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Lomas.
I have a couple questions. You'd mentioned that your developments are measured in a tier, and you'd mentioned that this one was a tier 0. Did I hear that right?
Right. For Love's, we have the 522 travel stops and country stores, but we also have, I think, 60 or 80 C stores, just basic C stores that you would see like a local AM, PM or something. So we have those, but that's not our main business. We've had those since the company started in 1964. It was all C-store business, and then the trucking industry started in the 80s. So we've always called our largest facilities tier 1s, until just recently, within the last 6 months or so, we came up with Tier 0, which is a little better, bigger, nicer facilities. So it gives a little growth space, mainly just with the travel stop, the new decor. You'll probably noticed in the picture, it really looks very different than Tulare or Tehachapi store. So a lot of different outside look and the inside look. The restrooms are big and bold and beautiful, and just more space in there for the C-store mainly. So those are our Tier 0s.
And has the Tier 0 been built in California?
Do we have one?
In California?
This will be, I believe, our first one. Madero was a late addition on a Tier 1, so it would be the first one with a Tier 0.
Okay. My second question is, you're asking for a revised condition, and you read the condition, but could you give us the reasoning and your thought behind that?
Can you, one more time? I only have one ear, so you
And I
gotta
have a mask on my face. You're asking for a revised condition, so here we go. He heard me.
Yeah, I can speak on that a little bit. The reason for that is, I'm afraid, just interpreted quite literally, that it could cause us trouble. The property is not owned by Love's right now. It's under contract or in escrow for purchase. The current owner is Elmer F. Carp Incorporated. So I'm afraid if that condition is interpreted quite literally, it would mean that once the new landowner, being Love's, acquires the property, that they would have to go through this again. I know that's not the intent, but I think it would be a little bit better to try to clean up the wording just a little bit.
Okay, so then I'll direct the rest of the question to staff. What is your response?
To that condition?
Yes, please.
Staff concurs with that, because currently read it says, if the property is sold to a new landowner, the new owner shall obtain approval of the future site plan. And by adding what they're requesting, it says if the property is sold to the new landowner, other than the end user or affiliate company of the end user specifically named in the staff report, then the new owner shall. So it just, as they're saying, Love's is the intended builder, but they're not the property owner right now. So staff concurs with the change.
Thank you. That's all I got for now.
Commissioner Cater.
Just a quick question on the landscape plan that was provided up front. Is the intent to not provide landscaping on the northeast or the northeast corner of the project, the truck maintenance and parking portion of the project?
On the northeast corner, we don't have any. That's with the surrounding fields back there. With obviously predominantly we put in as much as we could per your code up front. I would say dealing with landscaping, this would be number 1 or top 5. I don't do all the sites in the United States, but I do a lot of them, and this would probably be the most landscape Love's travel stop in the company. So that back area with the fields out there, we just moved most of the landscaping up front.
Thank you. This is not the time for opinions, so I have a question for staff following up. When an M1 or a C2 is adjacent to what is planned and an estate zoning, is any sort of landscape barrier required from a paved surface?
That property to the north right now is in the county jurisdiction, and it's zoned A1, limited agriculture. It is pre-zoned for the city as E, estate, for residential, but it is not that zoning right now. So to place houses on there, they would have to either annex into the city or rezone it through the county. But that is something your commission can consider as the future use of that site.
Okay. And I'll withhold my comments, but okay, that was a question. So, thank you.
Commissioner Bell, did you have any questions? Okay, thank you. Ms. Lomas has another question, so we'll go back to her.
On that north boundary, is a block wall required?
A block wall is required if the property is zoned or designated residential, and that property to the north is designated residential. So yes, a minimum 6-foot block wall is required. That would meet minimum development standards.
Thank you.
Because that leaves me. So, first of all, I want to say thank you for your presentation. You did a really nice job of coming with some color markups. We really appreciate those. One of the things that we need to consider is that whenever any of the commissioners or anybody in public administration in the city of Bakersfield goes out and talks to people in the community, they always run into somebody that, you know, from Northern California or Southern California or somewhere, and you tell them you're from Bakersfield, and every single one of them has a story of breaking down in Bakersfield. You know, they're going to Vegas, my car broke down, or I ran out of gas coming from Los Angeles. And so the idea of a truck stop less than a third of a mile away from our southern marker that says welcome to Bakersfield gives us pause. So if we seem like we're being over detailed in dealing with this particular application, that's really the reason. Do we want to be known as the truck stop capital of California? And so that's the reason for our hesitation on this project. All the commissioners have looked at this project, and it's question time, right? Still questions, yes? Okay, so I'll stop rendering opinion. I apologize. Apologize to other commissioners. Okay. So thank you. So I'm going to switch over to those people and ask a question. There was a question from Councilman Parlier, and I may be saying that improperly. I apologize. And I think that he meant Mr. Coyle when Mr. Coyle was here, but this had to do with a referral that he had asked that staff consult Supervisor Scrivener's office, who's the county supervisor for that area. Do we have any feedback from them at all?
That request was actually made prior to when this project was going to be considered at your March 5th Planning Commission meeting. And at that time, staff did reach out to Supervisor Scrivener's office, but there was no interest in a response to provide back.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of my questions. So let me see where we're at on the agenda. So do I close the public hearing now? We can go on to comments. All right. Okay, I will now close the public hearing on this item and return it to the commission for comment and action. So, any commissioner comments? Commissioner Cater.
So I stopped my conversation because it was getting into the comment territory. So I would to go back to the landscaping in the north and east part of this project. I think looking at this is the perfect image. I think claiming that the land of the north is going to be agriculture for very long is not very accurate to the reality of what's there. I think we find a lot of these issues at this part of town where the city limit, the county line are kind of murky and they cross and go back and forth. But I think the reality is that we have a emerging suburban neighborhood surrounding this site. And I think unlike many truck stops that you see that are surrounded by truly fields, I-5, this is a project that will have a fairly close adjacency to neighbors in what would be the matter of years, not decades, I think. So my question is, looking at the site plan, and I think it's really helpful that we were able to see a landscape plan because the visual provided in our packet there was no really distinction between what was just impermeable soil and what was landscaped area. And to me, this landscape plan looks like two different projects, you know, if you took the left side of the image and the right side of the image. And understand that our landscape standards do not require shading for truck stop spaces, because logistically that would create probably not an ideal situation for truck stops. But along the perimeter and along the kind of north boundary of that retention basin, I was wondering what, to city staff, is anything required for adjacencies between M1 and other urban uses? And then if not, just, I would like to hear other commissioners' thoughts on kind of landscaping and consideration for the whole site and not just the restaurant and the restaurant fast food portion of it. So question for, yeah.
So again, along the north side where it's zoned A1 currently in the county, there is, landscaping is not required. The block wall is required, but not landscaping. Again, your commission can look and see that this site is for a future zoned estate, which is a minimum 10,000 square foot lots, approximately quarter-acre lots that could potentially even be subdivided even further. And so where you have truck parking at some point in the future, it's reasonable to assume that, yes, there could be some residential to the north.
I mean, you have 3 residential streets that just stop, so I think it's, yeah. So I would just, I'm interested in other commissioners' thoughts on perimeter landscaping at that truck stop portion, of the truck parking portion of the site.
Thank you, Commissioner Cater. Commissioner Lomas.
I would defer to you on the streetscape, but that northeast corner, you're probably going to get a subdivision that's going to have a backyard, and the landscaping would be not needed. It's going to be a high maintenance item for the owners, and it's not going to be seen. So I'm not concerned about the northeast portion, but the rest, yeah, make it pretty. Go ahead, Daniel, make it pretty.
Thank you, Commissioner Lomas. Commissioner Bell.
So if I get this right, Paul, if you, sorry, Director, if on the northeast, north and east sides, if that was already estate or residential, what would the landscape requirement be other than the wall?
100% evergreen, 1 tree for every 20 feet.
Right. It will not happen post. Will the residential development have to meet that obligation against an M1?
No.
That's what I thought. I think it's absolutely more than sufficient at this phase. I think our dilemma really comes later on. And I don't see any fair way to give a condition that they're really not obligated to make at this time. I'm very aware of the 6-foot wall being a condition, but I also know that there are probably height issues. They could literally build 50, 55 feet. It usually has to do with the height of, if they were to add something at a later time, since it's not under a PD, it's just a conditional use permit change later on. They could have some tall structures in here as well.
If they wanted future development on the site, yes, they could put taller structures within there. It should be noted also that the conditional use permit, as your commission is aware, currently goes to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. Right. If your commission would like to recommend conditions onto that CUP, staff can take that forward to the Board of Zoning Adjustment. And it may be appropriate now to mention that there was a referral from City Council to relook at conditional use permits, and if the commission is the appropriate place for that compared to the BZA, Board of Zoning Adjustment.
Got it, thank you. Yeah, to be very honest, I think it's more than adequate as proposed. My difficulty is that we're adding conditions that
could be way, 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 way down the road. And I'm having a little bit of a fairness issue with the north and the east. The 6-foot wall will certainly not be adequate against a good estate planning, but I'm a little unsure if it's really fair to ask them to condition beyond what they're already being asked. Like I'm not helping much, am I? So I want to consider that a little more.
And through the chair, if I may clarify, Commissioner Bell, the east side is zoned C2 commercial zone with the county and with the city. So the east side of that property would not require any additional landscaping or a wall.
Any other commissioner comments? So I have some concerns regarding the landscape plan myself. I have two concerns. One is the landscape buffer at the west side of the property against the canal. And I know that the Kern Delta asked us not to put a fence or a wall there along their easement of the canal. But and I don't know if we have a full-size landscape plan we can put on the screen or what, but it just looks like there's not an adequate buffer on the west side of the property. And then I also have a question about the landscape setbacks along Taft Highway and whether they truly meet our current landscape setback requirement. And I was intending to look that up before I sat down here and I got distracted, but I thought we had 15 feet along that main highway.
Correct. Along Taft Highway, east of State Route 99, it's 15 feet. West of State Route 99, it's 30 feet.
Okay. And so, does this plan comply to that?
Yes.
Okay. There was a question about the number of trees and the interval of trees. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Project frontage trees, that is 70% deciduous, 30% evergreen, 1 tree for every 20 feet. What you see in front of the sump is 1 tree for every 20 feet. In front of the parking area, since there are more than 10 parking spaces facing Taft Highway, there is a hedge that will be required. And again, those trees should be 1 to every 20 feet or the intent made on that. And it appears that the intent is trying to be made with the tree islands that go into the parking area to also count towards the 40% shade calculation. But those trees that you see just specifically on the frontage are approximately 35 to 40 feet apart.
And did we specify, because I know that you start crowding the trees, you got to have the right kind of trees, because otherwise they kind of grow into each other. Did we specify the nature of the trees that we were requiring at 20-foot intervals?
We do not.
Okay. And does this plan conform to our current architectural standards that were recently adopted by the City Council? That's section 17-08.
It does not conform to those standards only because the application was submitted prior to those standards taking effect.
Okay. And would it be a hardship for the developer to meet the current standard as adopted?
I would say on the maintenance building, yes, because that maintenance building appears to be potentially like a prefab metal building. It would be difficult to meet the standards on that. They could potentially revise the stick-built convenience store restaurant to meet the standard. It appears there's 2 elevations that may not meet that standard.
And what is our ability to apply additional conditions to this approval this time? Can we request additional landscaping? Can we get higher walls at the back of the property? Can we condition those items as part of this plan?
I would say we would have to take those specifically one by one. If you were requesting a higher wall along the north side, to whatever height, if you want to say 8 feet, staff can bring your recommendations forward as part of the conditional use permit. In part, you may want to speak with the developer on revising certain, if you want the convenience store or restaurant to meet current standards, you may want to speak with the developer on that to make sure that's feasible for them. The additional landscaping, again, the minimum will have to be met. If you would like to go above and beyond, again, staff can take that forward as part of the conditional use permit.
So how do we move forward from here?
Since it sounds like there may be some additional requirements you would like to see either with the development or the site plan, I suggest that we go ahead and start one by one. Staff will take notes to make sure that we get that as part of a recommendation to the Board of Zoning Adjustment for the conditional use permit.
So we would be approving the zone change with a recommendation to the BZA?
You would be approving the general plan amendment and zone change, and that is a recommendation to City Council. Any other items with development of the site is something that will be incorporated into the conditional use permit that staff will take forward to the Board of Zoning Adjustment as commission recommendations. And staff will be supportive of those.
Okay. So and I'll poll all the commissioners, but while I have the microphone open, I'll just say that I am concerned about that wall to the north part of the property, and I really think that should be an 8-foot wall, and at some point, we should have a wall on the east side of that property, and whether we condition it now or make the next person do it, on dividing the two parcels. No? Okay. Well, the housing's behind. Right. And one last question about the architecture or the landscape plan. What is the current height of the landscape along Truxton, along Taft Highway? Is that supposed to be 4 feet at the time of completion? We changed the ordinance in last fall.
Are you talking about the hedge along where the parking is? I believe it's 4 feet, yes, at time of planting.
Right.
The trees are going at 24-inch box.
Okay. All right. I'll turn over the floor to Commissioner Cater.
Thank you. And thank you for the discussion. Thank you for the comments, commissioners. I just wanted to kind of speak back on the items about conditions of approval for this project. I think one thing we look at and we often shake our heads at, we're often frustrated with as a commission, is how our community leapfrogs and how we encounter uses that have been, buildings that have been established, uses that have been established, put in, that technically worked with the surrounding as the surrounding was changing, as it was emerging, and we weren't thinking about in 5-10 years what the adjacent neighbors were going to be. And there's a tension because what might have worked as a gas station service center, you know, now new neighbors don't like it to be adjacent. So I think part of the general plan zone change is an applicant making a request, giving additional information than what would be required to make the case as to why this is good for the community. And I think I'm very impressed by Love truck stops, enjoy frequenting them when I can on my way up and down I-5. And I appreciate the additional information. I do think that its prominent location, its fact that it is more part of what is becoming our urban boundary and less, less isolated. I do think that, and maybe I'm not fully with Larry on some of his conditions, but I do think that I would like to ask the commission to, the adjacency of a C2 and an M1, I think that makes a lot of sense. That north wall, we're already landscaping half of the site, and so I would ask the developer and ask the commission if we considered just landscaping the entire length of that north boundary as a condition. Thinking about adjacent uses and also just thinking about, I think for me as a commissioner, I think, part of our discretion in reviewing site plans is, is this cohesive? Is it creating an urban landscape that is, and I think while the letter of our landscape standards really do focus on the 15 feet next to the site, I think that the landscape of the whole site does play into how we perceive our community, how the site is perceived. And yeah, so I think the fact that it would be required if the parcel to the north was a little further along, we have multiple residential streets waiting to connect to that street. I think while the letter of the current zoning maybe isn't required, I think it's one of those things of, do we want to treat a project as it currently is and not how it might be in 5-10 years? And that would be my only other comment. But we're a group of 5-7, and so I will, ask other commissioners for thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Cater. Commissioner Lomas. Okay, we'll go to Mr. Bell, Commissioner Bell.
So I'm going to try to get a little bit in the middle here, because I understand the 6-foot wall is just a large cost to you and really isn't going to do a lot, but it is required. It's an important buffer. I would ask Commissioner Cater and others to consider that we not go to the 20-foot on center. You've done such a good job against Taft Highway, such a good job against the freeway. The access to this center is going to be beautifully landscaped. We're basically asking them to take care of something that's not specifically required. However, from my point of view, I think their architecture is sufficient. And if we do talk about an obligation, I would push it off the 20-foot on center. I do not know what the center to center is on the other northern trees. It looks 30, 40 feet, 50 feet. But I think that would be a compromise. If the developer has no problem, I would be in favor of that. Let's not push it to the 20-foot like you show on Taft Highway. That is very aggressive. It will literally make a wall. I'd like to see some obligation on the development on the estate side or whatever the future is. And I think that would be an outstanding, not as expensive as a 20-foot on center, whatever the obligation is on the western half of that north wall. I'd like to see that be considered if the commissioners would concur.
Commissioner Lomas.
Okay, this is for staff. Can you come back to this one, but can you put up an aerial? The aerial of that area. Okay, perfect. All right, so if you're looking at this, and let's just imagine on what's coming next. It's going to, so to staff, my question to you is, would a road be at that northern point, or would it be someone's backyard?
That would likely be someone's backyard.
That's my point. So why are we landscaping an interior? You would be landscaping the interior of the wall, not the exterior. Are you asking for the exterior? But then now now you're limiting what can be done on the northern portion. And again, and to speak to walling the east side, you're going to be dealing with traffic flow, and you're also going to be limiting the development of that parcel. So I'm not for the northern piece because we don't know what's coming. They'll know that the truck stop's there. And that'll be what they've got to deal with in developing this piece of property. But to demand that they spend money on landscaping that nobody's going to really see for someone's backyard, it doesn't make sense to me. I'm all for dressing up the front, the southern and the western side, because that is the gateway to our city. It's right in the beginning, so we want it to really look pretty. But I don't think anybody's going to see the back portion. And I'll listen to you smart guys tell me what I'm missing.
Commissioner Rudnick.
I've kind of been listening to everybody's comments and thinking about the future uses, which I think is really a big issue. I don't know that there's a guarantee that there will not be a road as a buffer between future residential development and the north side of the travel mall, or whatever the technical name we should use. If there is a possibility that there is going to be a road back there, I would be more in favor of landscaping and the 8-foot wall. From my understanding, there is still a potential that a developer developing that 30 or 40 acre piece there could do some type of a roadway. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely, they could.
Right. So in my mind, and I'm not trying to pick on the developer at all, but as everyone's mentioned, this is towards the beginning of the city, and we really want to make sure that we set a nice tone for folks coming through our town. I would be more in favor with an 8-foot wall on that north side, and with at least meeting minimum landscaping requirements towards potential future residential on that north side. On the east side, I understand that's going to be commercial and that'll take care of itself. But on that north side, since there is that large unknown, I think we should think ahead in that regard. That's all.
Commissioner Bell.
All right, one last stab. Yeah, I don't see the 6-8 foot, and I'm, ironically, Commissioner Rudnick, I see it differently, that if that were the backyard, my concern would be greater for the trees, because the truck stop, the actual parking as well, Commissioner Lomas, is that, whether they drive in front way and they're looking over onto your backyard, it limits the development of an estate lot depending on how they split it up. With everything Commissioner Rudnick said, with the exception of 8 foot, I would be in favor of a standard landscape requirement on the back, 40 foot, whatever it is on center, only for the purpose of doing the minimum obligation from this development. We're not going to get another stab. I apologize, developers, that this is a little bit of a sticking point, but I understand it. But I'm fine with a 6-foot wall, because I don't see a real big issue between a 6 and an 8, because the truck is so much higher. Trucks can be almost 16 feet, 15 feet or something. So it will be a shade itself, and they can allow it to drive in frontward or backward. So that's I think my last 2 cents. But that would be my concern, them looking over into the development adjacent and making it less than attractive to a potential development on the north.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. Commissioner Keeter.
Thank you. Just following up with landscape and Commissioner Lomas's thoughts, thank you for those. I would just claim that landscape is more than tree frontage and entrances into parking lots. I think, the intent behind landscaping between commercial and residential is not really to create an attractive street front. It's to provide screening. It's to provide an edge to or adjacencies that is pleasant and pleasing. And I think a site that's essentially pole lighting and trucks, I think creating an edge, a buffered edge with some trees. I do actually, I like Commissioner Bell's suggestion of the trees being spaced more akin to what we're already seeing on the north wall, because I think that would be sufficient to just provide a consistent language, but not necessarily the 20-foot spacing or some of the enhancements that we ask at the street front. And then, yeah, as far as the 6 to 8, I see the headlight issue. I'm kind of more in the camp of, I think 6 is our requirement, and I think that I would be okay with seeing a 6-foot wall because that is our standard. And then, yeah, I would just say, I think we haven't really spoken about the architectural review aspect of it, but I think, for me, I think the Love convenience store and the fast food and the materials proposed and the kind of variation of color, I would be fine with the architectural expression as currently shown. So I would just ask that the north landscape be extended across the length of the property.
Thank you, Commissioner Cater. Commissioner Lomas.
Okay, I'm not a developer, but I know there's a couple of you up here, so explain this to me. I'm looking at Commissioner Bell and Commissioner Cater. So let's say that this is developed, the northern boundary is developed with a whatever height wall, and on the northern side of that wall, you're asking for a landscape strip. Okay, right? Have I got this right? No. In the interior. There you go. I can.
Yeah, I think the clarification is that in
You want it on the
the
interior.
strip that exists there that's not currently proposed to be planted, that it would be planted at a.
Got it.
yeah.
All right, I
Yeah,
figured.
no buffer loss of sight, just.
Because that's going to mess up the guy on the other side. All right, I got it. I don't, if you would indulge me, I would love to hear from the developer on all this conversation that we've been having, and what does that, how does this affect your project and what they're discussing?
Commissioner Lomas, thank you for inviting me back up. And I'm sorry your hand is broke, or hopefully it's healing well. It's probably bothering you, and you'd probably rather be somewhere else than here. So, what I would tell you is I wholeheartedly hope that you don't condition us to do all these changes. Number one, our buildings are the nicest of anyone. I've already said this before, and you could go out and look at any of them. No one has buildings that Love's does. No one puts them up there. But it's because we're spending about $18 million on this project. So it's really hard for me to stand here and take on more than what I've seen on any project I've ever done for them or any of the other guys have done of covering up our business, when I thought I heard that the gateway is Hoskins. That's the gateway to your city, and your sign is also towards town, not before us, but after. I'd also discourage that we keep covering up more and more, especially the line of sights getting in and out of a busy travel stop, which it will be. I don't want to read in the paper that someone couldn't see and they pulled out on the road and they got killed. After we planted on then, all we could do is tear it back out. And I see it all over the place. I don't mind doing it, and we're trying our best to put these big hedges. And I think the actual that I've seen in almost every town is a 3-foot hedge, not a 4-foot. But Kay could correct me, Paul could correct me. That's what I've heard everywhere I go, is that this car light is 3 foot. You want to block the car lights. So we're doing this where we haven't before. All along Taft Highway, all along the west side on H Street. That's a lot of landscaping. And the back side, again, well, let me go back to the architect's design. I don't feel that we could do the project if we have to start changing all of our design. I spent a ton of time coming to your town and doing what we felt was the right thing to be where we are today and not to have to redo everything. I just can't see that that's going to happen. Ultimately, it's not my call. It's a guy by the name of Greg Love. I hope we could get a break somewhere for a minute where I can make some phone calls. On the landscaping again, do we have any application for anyone for a proposed development on that north side? Have we in the last 5 years? I can't foresee the future, but I don't think anything's been done out here anywhere till Love's came around. So again, putting stuff up that we already have a wall that's 6 foot all the way across, no one's going to see the hedges or the small trees until they get really, really large. So I'm not sure that what that really does, especially if we're feeling like there's going to be a road on the other side of the wall. And then you have the back side of all of their homes, which they all have typically fences. I'm just not sure I get it. But we want to be here. I'll consider anything. But the architectural piece, that's a whole different ballgame for me. So I'm willing to make a call on trees at 40 foot along that north or something, but I would ask to please excuse me for 5-10 minute recess for I could make some phone calls. I don't know if I answered your question.
Commissioner Lomas, do you have any more questions for the applicant?
No, thank you. That's the only question I had for you. It is a nice project, and I would be happy to support it.
Thank you, Commissioner Lomas. Commissioner Cater.
Thank you. Thank you for the additional description. And I would just note that I think the landscape concerns that you expressed were those fronting Taft Highway, which are part of our standards. Unfortunately, that's not really what we're looking at tonight. And just if the chair grants the recess, essentially what our commission's asking, you're showing 10 trees to the north of the property. I think we're asking what essentially is 9 more trees on a project of $18 million. And I think that is the landscaping component we're talking about. And so I think I understand your uncertainty about kind of your standards as a developer and your product getting thrown into question, but on the landscaping component, we're really asking at 9 trees. And so that would be my only comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Cater. Commissioner Bell.
Yeah, so to the developer, I'm in the same boat here. I don't think, I'm certainly not asking for architectural changes on my side, and I am fairly satisfied, but I'm looking at 9 to 12 trees as the only add I'm seeing. Nothing else in my mind right now is beyond that north buffer, and with the other commissioners, we have just been a part of development in the city for so long where we're not considering things going forward. We won't have another shot at you. We don't need another shot at you. And this is our one shot. You're going to NEM. I don't see any other thing but those few. And I did the math as well. 9 to 12 trees is all I see. And for that's it. And I understand from a development point of view more than you know. So I'm trying to be as considerate. You are doing an amazing job with everything that I see on there. We're excited about seeing you here. I think it's a very viable project, very viable.
So to the applicant, do you have the authority for the 9 trees, or do you need a recess?
I just need 5 minutes.
Okay. We'll go ahead and take a recess for like 10 minutes because we could probably all use a little bit of break. So I'll recess for 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, we'll reconvene the June 18th meeting of the Planning Commission, and we'll turn the floor over to the applicant if you have some more information for us.
Okay, thank you for the break. What I can do and can't do is I can't make any changes to the building. Hopefully, what we show is going to be appropriate and nice enough that we have your support. What I can do is accept that you want trees on that back northeast side. I would just ask that we limit to the 8 trees or whatever it is that you're wanting, with a little bit more spread than the 20 foot. And I would also ask just that we're not required to put in evergreens. And let me tell you why, is you've got a 6-foot wall on that side, so whoever in the future is on that other side, they're not going to see any of the evergreen till it's above 6 foot. If we could just do a normal tree, that would probably be better. At least they could see something up on top, but they're not going to see any of the rest of the tree. The bottom 6 foot's on us. The only ones that are going to see that part of the tree is the drivers who hate them. And the reason why, let me explain, is drivers and little semi 101, we'll call it, they can slide their axles. What that means is they have loads inside of there and they have to make different weights. So they slide their axles and they can shuffle them back and forth up to about 17 feet. So if you have a tree right behind them on their truck parking, guess what happens to the tree? So we'll deal with it. If that means it's our maintenance issue, then we'll figure it out. We only have about 20 feet, I think. So we're going to have to push it as close to the wall as we can. I just ask that it's a tree that is up tall and not an evergreen that no one's going to see it. It's just going to be a nightmare on our side. We'd be glad to accommodate that. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. So, Commissioner Cater.
Applicant, I just have one more question. Am I correct in reading the site plan that the elements in that current landscape strip are street lights? Like, or lighting for the truck stop, is that?
We do have light
Okay.
poles on that backside, yes.
Do you know what the spacing of those are, so we can make sure the trees kind of work with that? I don't want to make you have to read.
Are you asking what kind of
No,
light?
just what the spacing of the lighting is, so that we can,
Just the spacing between the lighting, we're talking 150 to 180 feet.
150, 180, okay,
Is that-
great. Just so that we provide an interval that works with what they're proposing.
That's just for proper photometrics.
Okay,
Yeah,
Mhm.
you got lighting fixtures.
So 150 would be a good, okay,
right.
cool. So I think, yeah, finding a spacing that works with the proposed lighting, so that's not needing to be revised. And then, I mean, I personally think deciduous trees give a better canopy and are more native to our area, and so I would be in support of that. And defer to staff, do you have a recommended spacing, or do you want commission to provide input on that?
Your commission can provide that if you want to have, every 45 feet or maybe 2 trees in between the light poles. That's your commission's decision.
Okay, so does any commissioner have a motion?
Yeah, I think I would say, 8 trees provided along that north wall at, and that kind of puts it at like 2 to 3 per bay, so.
So if I may, and this won't be part of the motion, but you're going to request there's 8 trees along that northern wall, let's just say evenly spaced?
Evenly spaced, so I think that would give a little leeway so that it doesn't have to be.
And if the applicant is okay with that, then again, we don't need a motion for that. We'll just make sure that the revised landscape plan reflects.
think we could fit them in there the best we can. It may not be exact equal.
So then what's the motion? The motion is just to approve the plan, or?
No, if you will, Chair Coleman, I'll read the motion.
Okay, that would be great, thank you.
So the motion would be to approve the general plan amendment to change the land use designation from GC to LI or more restrictive designation, and recommend the same to City Council. Approve the zone change from C2 to M1 or a more restrictive classification and recommend the same to City Council. Adopt the mitigated negative declaration and recommend the same to City Council. And revise condition 8 to read, if the property is sold to a new landowner other than the end user or affiliate company of the end user, specifically named in the staff report, the new owner shall obtain approval of the future site plan for the Planning Commission prior to receiving necessary permits to develop the site. That would be the motion. And again, we will review the revised landscape plan and ensure that's carried forward with the conditional use permit.
Yeah, with the additional trees?
That's correct.
Okay, that'll just be a staff thing. It's not in the motion itself.
That's correct, yes, Chair.
I'd like to make staff motion.
Okay. It's Commissioner Bell. Is anybody a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Cater. Madam Clerk, please conduct a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Coman,
Yes.
Commissioner Rudnick,
Yes.
Commissioner Bell,
Yes.
Commissioner Bowers, Commissioner Cater,
Yes.
Commissioner Lomas,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade. Motion is approved with Commissioners Bowers and Commissioner Wade absent.
Thank you. All right. Does that move us to, was there not an item, well, that was item 6, okay. That moves us to item 7, workshop regarding general plan. Mr. Johnson, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair Coleman. Actually, the Development Services Director, Christopher Boyle, will be presenting this.
All right. Well, welcome.
Thank you, Chairperson Coleman. Commissioners, it's great to be back here in front of the Planning Commission. You may or may not know that the Planning Division's sole and most important project moving forward into this upcoming fiscal year will be to begin the process of updating the general plan. And we currently have a consultant working towards releasing a general plan strategies and options report that will be going to the Council's Planning and Development Committee at the end of the month, and then ultimately a presentation will come back to you next month, and I'll visit you again before that strategy is ultimately acted upon by the City Council. That said, and in advance of that document being released for general digestion, I thought it important that perhaps we just start at the beginning, because that's a good place to start, and the process before you will have you engaged as a discretionary body for the better part of 3 years. So with that said, I think I'll do just that and begin at the beginning. The graphic here before you really is pulled from another city's general plan, and it's a reflection of the values and the goals that that general plan and that city wish to entertain, whether that be having community open space or additional shading or a higher architectural standard, or provide fresh fruits and vegetables to its residences and the like. And those shared visions of that community ultimately have been borne out in their general plan and within this graphic. For us, the question, what is the general plan, is one that I think is a good starting point. The council just, the commission just moments ago acted on approving a general plan amendment, and within that, we made findings within a zoning document that said that there's conformance between the proposed zoning and the general plan, and virtually every discretionary action before the commission, that's one of the critical components of your findings, that your action is consistent with the general plan. So what is the general plan? The general plan starts as really a blueprint for comprehensive long-term physical development of the city. It is a framework that provides direction for that city moving forward. 2, it's a foundation for community decisions that affect the future of housing, business, roads, parks, infrastructure, policy, you name it. A general plan is at the heart of what a city wishes to do with itself from a long-term perspective. It is essentially the foundation. This graphic too comes from another community's recent general plan update. That community's in New Jersey, and I just curious. I wanted to see whether there was any connection between this guiding principle planning document and perhaps what was going on in that city today. And sure enough, just on a lark, the one quick hit on Google brought up homes that were for sale, 3-story homes that were for sale in a neighborhood setting that had an architectural look and feel exactly consistent with this document, which wished to provide homes in a more denser form and provide more community open space, some of the visions that were shared by this town in New Jersey. So we know that it's a foundation and a blueprint for the city moving forward. And what's included within that blueprint? Well, there are 7 mandatory components known as elements that are included in every general plan. Those are land use, conservation, noise, circulation, open space, safety, and housing. And in light of the fact that this is an introductory workshop, I'm not going to go and spend a slide describing what each of those entails. But they are the foundational elements of a general plan. And oftentimes what you see within the general plan from the planning division's perspective is actions that are born out of the land use element. But the other elements still are important, and we'll talk a little bit about that. They're important to public works in terms of the conservation element and the circulation element and the appropriate planning and placement of streets to provide for the ability for our residents to get around. They're important to the Recreation and Parks Department in terms of open space and conservation as well, to development services as a whole as it relates to land use and housing, public safety in terms of safety and noise, water resources in terms of conservation, and making sure that the city has the appropriate resources to grow logically as it's designed to grow, and to our soon-to-be formulated Economic and Community Development Department as it relates to housing and land use and the logical advancement of the city in its vision that's borne out in its general plan. So all of the departments in the city are active in the ultimate formation of a general plan document. Sometimes we think that the general plan is really just a byproduct of planning, but ultimately every department in the city will touch on that because it takes the entirety of the city to really visualize where it wants to go and then ultimately take it there. Now, with that said, there can be optional elements included within this upcoming general plan effort. Some of those could be a dedicated economic development element where the newly formed Economic and Community Development Department provides for, is allowed to create that goal, those goals and policies moving forward that help them to realize the vision of the city. There can be sustainability elements or historic preservation elements or community design elements or public facilities and services, an optional element that's in your current general plan right now. The graphic there shows Union City, California's other optional elements, youth, family, seniors, and health being one of those being the shared visions of the residents of Union City. And within a new general plan update process, and through the visioning and reaching out to our citizens and to our decision makers and stakeholders in the community, those overriding values that maybe aren't expressed in those 7 primary elements can be added into that effort moving forward towards a general plan update that genuinely reflects the vision for the city moving forward. Thinking that the city has doubled in size in the last 20 years and now is a city of nearly 800,000, and that a general plan document typically goes for about 20 years. It's entirely reasonable, but this document will guide the city into a true metropolitan region with 800,000 people or more calling Bakersfield home. What do most general plans consist of? Well, they consist of, those elements consist of written text discussing the community's goals and their objectives and their policies and programs for each element that help to implement those various goals and policies. In our general plan, with that graphic right there with the circle with the goals and policies, it's broken into a similar format where the city discusses its principles and lays out objectives, and then there are goals and policies, and afterwards, on the page behind that one, there are implementation processes that help realize those policies moving forward. There's also maps and diagrams that help graphically describe where the city wants to go. Here's our circulation map within our current general plan document. And you can see the West Side Parkway was envisioned back in 2002, and maybe the connector from 58 South over to the west side wasn't within that document. Today, that's an observation that shows that over time, a city's goals and its vision for itself changes, which is why we update them about every 2 decades. I noted that the general plan was adopted in 2002, and there's about, usually general plans run in the 20-year cycle, and it guides the city's future and its vision for the future. And typically, there's going to be a visioning effort, which will ultimately lead to a set of standard principles that the city wishes to implement, and they'll implement those through goals and policies and then action items. Those action items, again, being called implementation items today in today's document. So that's where we are. The general plan's first paragraph does a great job in defining what the general plan is. It says the general plan is a policy document designed to give long-range guidance to those making decisions, such as yourselves, affecting the future character of the metropolitan Bakersfield planning area. It represents the official statement of the community's physical development, as well as its economic, social, and environmental goals. The general plan also acts to clarify and articulate the relationship and intentions of local government to the rights and expectations of the general public, property owners, and prospective investors. Through the plan, the local jurisdiction can inform these groups of its goals, policies, and development standards. So, in essence, the very first paragraph in the 2002 general plan defines the purpose and intent of the general plan, does a great job of doing so. Moving forward, I can see that paragraph largely not changing one iota. What I can see is what the visions that are expressed by our general public and the decision makers moving forward, well, they're going to naturally evolve since the city continues to evolve. It's important to note, too, that the general plan is not the same as zoning. The general plan, this long-term outlook, and it identifies the type of development that will be allowed and the spatial relationships among particular land uses. It's the zoning that regulates present development through specific standards, and you had a good exercise in that in your last discretionary entitlement, where we were looking at the general plan as that long-term overriding document, and looking at your zoning as the specific development standards therein. So in essence, within this general plan update, on the back side of that, we'll also be looking to update our zoning ordinance at the same time, because it's the zoning that will implement those general plan goals and policies. So these are exciting times. The future is now. This is as I noted to start, this is the start. And moving forward, with council direction, we'll begin to issue RFPs, which ultimately lead to the preparation of a general plan update that will guide the future development of the city over time. Next month, I'll bring to you a presentation of the general plan update strategy and options report so that you remain aligned with the information that will be provided to council, first at their Planning and Development Committee and then subsequently at their August general session, wherein staff would look for direction from the council moving forward. So I know that I'm excited. I know that Planning Division staff and the city overall is very excited about the events to come. Lots of work, but at the same time, this is exciting work, and I hope that the commission is excited as well, because not every planning commissioner gets the opportunity to really shape the future of the community it serves, and so it's a genuine honor that you have this opportunity. That completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Commissioner Cater, I see you fiddling with the thing over there. Did you want to ask some questions?
I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, and I look forward to being part of for the commission being part of the process. Exciting.
Thank you, Commissioner Cater. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Bell?
Can I ask a timeline? I'm so sorry, just before you sat down. I asked what your perspective timeline is from, you said a consultant is working with you now. Have they been hired on to, will it go out for RFP and then that process, and what are we thinking of the length of time?
Thank you for your question, Commissioner Bell. The current consultant right now is only working on the options document. So the city would like the professional opinion of the consulting community as to what the correct approach to updating the general plan might look like, and to provide a set of options that the council could digest and provide direction to staff thereon. So the RFP for the actual preparation of the general plan, that hasn't been prepared yet, because our first effort is with the consultant and just providing this strategy and options document. And it's right now in a draft report form. Staff has provided final comments to them, and we expect to have that final document in our hands in the next 10 days or so, in advance of the Planning and Development Committee meeting of the council, which would be on June 30th. From there, then we would provide a presentation to the council to the commission next month on the findings of that report, and then take that presentation to the council for them to digest, and then hopefully to provide direction moving forward with the issuance of an RFP for the specific preparation of the general plan update. In terms of the timeline to do that, well, it's not easy. One of the most important components of that general plan update is a consensus from the community. And so there's a real visioning and consensus effort. And that effort could take a good year in being able to touch all the stakeholder groups and to develop a shared vision for the city moving forward. So I think that the first year you could expect that the city will be providing opportunities for comment, getting out there, holding workshops, you name it. There shouldn't be a single community event where the city doesn't have a pop-up tent with question cards and things like that, because every opportunity to seek the comments of the community is going to be there. At the same time, I know that just in my brief time here, I've looked to develop relationships with key stakeholders so that we might have stakeholder groups that can also meet and talk about what we're good at, what we're not good at, and a pathway forward that makes us good at all things, because there's such great potential in the city of Bakersfield that it'd be wonderful to see a document that helps the city realize its fullest potential moving forward. So after that, I think the entire body of work for a general plan update, it should be at about the 3-year mark to taking that document, its supporting environmental impact report, to decision makers for adoption and ultimate certification of the EIR by the state. And within that, where there are many moving pieces, and we will shepherd that document through and to our decision-making bodies. And you may find yourself busy for a time after that outreach effort is completed. I hope that answers your question, Commissioner Bell.
Thank you, Commissioner Bell. Commissioner Cater, do you have more questions?
One quick question came to me, this might be premature, but the current general plan has the 8 elements that are kind of a minimum of a city's general plan. Are we looking at any additional elements in this upcoming general plan?
Well, I think that we're prepared to, as staff, to take feedback from our decision makers and from stakeholders in the community and brings about consensus on adding additional elements to the general plan beyond the 7 that are mandatorily required. And I threw out some examples of what some of those might look like. The city's recently added an entire economic and community development department, and an economic and community or an economic development element might provide them a set of specific goals and policies and action items that help them realize their fullest potential moving forward. We have a historic preservation commission in the community, and perhaps a historic preservation element might be an important component of an updated general plan. Sustainability, you name it, community design. The commission tonight, in my observations, there's an attention to detail from the commission as it relates to the design of the community. And so a community design element might provide for specific principles, goals, and policies that would allow the commission moving forward to better implement an overall vision for what the city wants itself to look like in the future. Really, the ability of the general plan to have additional elements will be at the discretion of decision makers, and as we begin to develop consensus on where our values are and where we want to take the city overall. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments, questions? Thank you for your presentation today. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Chair.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right, so moving on to item 8 on our agenda is communications. Commissioner Director Johnson.
Yes, our next meeting will be right now July 16th. Looks like the July 2nd meeting will be canceled.
Thank you. Any commissioner comments? Seeing none, that brings us to adjournment. And we're adjourned.